About 10 days or so, we have been discussing deconstructive theory. And in our discussion of deconstruction, obviously, our major concern was the ideas of Jacques Derrida. So we have been trying to discuss Jacques Derrida's ideas. And you know that we have also covered a lot of ground where we discussed many of those important concepts in deconstructive theory. So our familiarity with the concepts of logocentrism or monocentrism or trace or difference, which we have been discussing, that this familiarity is important. In our last discussion that was held on Thursday, we were talking about two, three important questions which relate to one, politics of deconstruction. Second, the nature or overall nature of Jacques Derrida's work. And also another important question is how Derrida has been received in literary criticism. So let me just resume our discussion from that particular point where we talked about Jacques Derrida and his work. What is important about Derrida's work is that we cannot confine Jacques Derrida to one single discipline because his work challenges many assumptions and many protocols of a number of subjects like philosophy, like linguistics, right, like psychology. So, in other words, you see that he traverses all these different disciplines very smoothly. So, one cannot say that Derrida is a linguist or a philosopher or a literary critic or any one category in strict terms because he is touching different disciplines. He is challenging the foundation, he's challenging the protocols, he's challenging the assumptions of different disciplines. And here this can be understood with reference to one actual event in Jacques Derrida's life that throws a very interesting light on the reception of Jacques Derrida or the kind of response his work has evoked and the kind of response his own personality has evoked. In 1992, Cambridge University, and you know that Cambridge University is one of the oldest universities in the world. Cambridge University decided to confer honorary doctorate on Jacques Derrida. Now we are in our university and we see that every year on convocation, an honorary PhD degree is awarded to some distinguished people, to some distinguished guests, to some distinguished persons. In this case, in Cambridge University in 1992, it was Jacques Derrida who was supposed to receive that honorary degree of doctorate. Derrida was already a very established name by this time. In fact, Derrida was a very established name from late 1960s and all through 70s and 80s, Derrida remained a very important figure in the continent. But more than 200 Cambridge University dons, professors, they made a representation against the award of this degree to Jacques Derrida. Interesting. And what was their contention? Their contention was that Derrida is being awarded this degree for his contribution to philosophy. But he is no philosopher. He is no philosopher. And if you look at his work and the kind of impact that he has had, his impact can be seen much more in the fields of literary criticism and film studies and maybe some other studies, but certainly not in philosophy. Hello, Aisha. Good to see you. So that
Yes,
means
sir.
when we think about Jacques Derrida, when we think about his whole corpus of writings. And when we think about his influence, then these dons had this view that Derrida's influence may be there, but not in the field of philosophy, but rather in literary criticism and in other fields. So this suggests an important dimension of Jacques Derrida's work. And what is that important dimension of Jacques Derrida's work? That you cannot tie Jacques Derrida to one single subject because he questions the foundation of different disciplines. And another reason why many people have taken offense at Jacques Derrida's ideas is that his writing is very abstract. His writing is very abstruse. And even these Cambridge dons wrote in that representation that, okay, if somebody tries very hard to understand what Derrida is saying, if they try to penetrate through his work with the hope that they will find something very substantial, they meet with disappointment at the end. That is the charge. And another charge against him was that too often his writing is indulging in a kind of wordplay, in a very loose kind of wordplay, where he reaches from one particular point to another in this kind of linguistic journey. And so often it poses problem of understanding, it poses problems of comprehension, right? So that was the charge against him. And you know that that year was 1992, and we discussed one important book that Derrida produced around this time, and that work suggests something about the politics of deconstruction, because it is not only these Cambridge dons, but rather many other, say, writers and theorists. They have questioned the politics of deconstruction and what is their charge against deconstruction. The most important charge is that deconstruction is quite on political questions, that deconstruction is silent on political questions, that deconstruction is evasive on political questions. So this is one charge. And the other charge is that deconstruction is taking a very unhealthy interest in formalism. And here formalism also reduced to a very inventive kind of wordplay. In other words, this charge of silence on political questions and this charge of excessive formalism, these are two important charges. I repeat, charge of maintaining a kind of silence on political questions and this charge of formalism, that means deconstruction involving itself in linguistic wordplay. So these two charges are important. And here, if we look at that later work that we discussed the other day, this is the work which is titled Spectres of Marx. Spectres of Marx. And what did we identify there in that work? One interesting insight that all contemporary theory is a kind of engagement with Marxism. Creative engagement, and sometimes this engagement is in the form of agreement and sometimes it is in the form of disagreement. But literary theory cannot forget, even for a moment, Marxism. And here, when Derrida talks about his work, he also makes it obvious that his work could not have been possible without Marxism. He is not a Marxist, but his work, Spectres of Marx, says suggests something. And here he was answering one political question. The other day I explained that question, but let me just repeat because it is important, especially for students of film studies, students of cultural theory, and students who may believe that deconstruction is all about wordplay. We introduced one concept, and that was the term hauntology. Hauntology, Hauntology, hauntology. And if you see here, there are two words in this. One is haunt, something which haunts. The other is logic. In French language, which was the language in which Jacques Derrida wrote, hauntology sounds like ontology. And ontology is the study of being. Ontology is the study of being, existence, our reality, our world, how we see our reality, that thing. So, in a way, when ontology is a study of being, Musafir, welcome. And hauntology, what is this? And here, let us get some meaning out of this word. In 1991, Soviet Union disintegrated. And with the disintegration of Soviet Union, there was also a supposed fall of one very important ideology. And what was that ideology? That was the ideology of communism, which supported that state of Soviet Union. So when you see fall of communism, especially brought about by that very important political event, the disintegration of Soviet Union, was a very important moment in world history. And those of us who have followed, say 1991, most of you, most of my students obviously were not born in 1991, but I can recall that moment where when Soviet Union disintegrated, when one particular state was just disintegrating and then another state, it was a very big moment. And maybe it will not say harm you if we just talk a little bit more about this. You know that after the Second World War, what happened was that two countries were least affected by the war. One was the United States of America and the other was Soviet Union. That means one important reason why British colonialism, say, received a kind of blow was also because Britain was greatly ravaged by the war. And so in later years, it became very important to play the game of colonialism because it was proving very expensive. Right. So Soviet Union and United States of America, these two countries emerged as two superpowers. And there was also a particular phase when you did not have actual war, but you had Cold War. And this Cold War also meant that the world was divided into two important blocks. One was the bloc which was led by United States of America, especially its philosophy of capitalism, and the other was the socialist bloc, or say the bloc which was led by Soviet Union and many other East European countries. So when Soviet Union say disintegrated, it was a big movement. And you know that till that time it was always Soviet Union which used to top the medal tally in Olympic Games. It was Soviet Union which was leading in space technology. So suddenly when Soviet Union disintegrated, it was a big movement. And in the Western world, especially in the Western world, the champions of capitalism were ecstatic. They were speaking in very triumphant tone. They were speaking the language of victory. And what is this language of victory? That with the fall of communism, there is only one philosophy, left in the world. And what is that philosophy? This is the philosophy of capitalism. And at this time, there appeared one very important book by an American philosopher, Fukuyama, Francis Fukuyama. And Francis Fukuyama proclaimed the death of history. The death of history means that history is now dead. It has reached one final point. And what is that final point in the journey of history? This final point is the triumph of capitalism, the triumph of Western style of capitalism, the triumph of capitalism, which is represented by the philosophy with United States of America championed. So this is the political context. So when Derrida wrote this work, Spectres of Marx, it was written in the context of this debate, fall of communism, disintegration of Soviet Union, proclamation of the philosophy of capitalism in very ecstatic terms from somebody like Francis Fukuyama. And so there we see that this work appears, and Derrida advances this idea that Karl Marx, who had a seminal influence on communism or that philosophy of socialism, Western world or the West is always haunted by the specter of Karl Marx. Specter means ghost, spirit, apparition. So the Western world is always haunted by the specter of Karl Marx. That means Western world cannot forget Karl Marx. Western world cannot forget communism. Western world cannot forget the ideology represented by Karl Marx's ideas. So that is one important concept which is advanced by Jacques Derrida in Spectres of Marx. That means the spectre of Marx, his ghost, haunts the Western world, haunts Western world, which is represented by the ideology of capitalism. Derrida uses this word ontology three times in this text, and he also uses a reference from Hamlet's speech, and especially there is also a reference to the presence of the ghost. And now we can also see the connection between the concept of ontology or the logic of ontology. The logic of ontology. Please don't get this word wrong. Hauntology comes from the word haunt analogy. Hauntology. 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 Right. Now, here. And there was a question, why Western world only? Yes, this is an interesting question. Isan is asking this question. Why is it that the ghost of Marx haunts only the Western world? Actually, here more important is the ideology of capitalism. And because West is based on this, say, Western democracy, especially say something that you see in the United States of America that is based on this philosophy. And because Derrida's work also has a frame of reference, and that frame of reference is something that is taking place in Western Europe and of course United States of America. And so when you say that ghost of say Marx or spectre of Marx always haunts the Western world, so probably we are talking about Derrida's frame of reference, right? Because it is the Western world represented by United States of America which proclaimed the death of communism. And here the reference was also to the philosophy or to the thesis of Francis Fukuyama when he proclaimed the death of history. Okay, so coming back to this idea that ontology, and why is ontology an important concept in our hands? Why is ontology an important concept for students of literature and also students of other subjects? So let me just speak a little bit about this. You see, when the ghost appears in Hamlet, the ghost comes from the past, and the ghost is in the present. Does the ghost belong to the past, or does the ghost belong to the present? Is past important in the case of the ghost, or is present important in the case of the ghost? That means this entire thing is problematized. This entire thing is blurred. And you know that Derrida's work talks a great deal about the idea of difference. The idea of difference. So it means that the actual, the real, the actual and real, it also has its other. And what is its other? What is its other? Something which is not present, something which is absent. So the ghost is present in the present, but there is also this idea of absence, something which is not present. And you know that Derridian philosophy, say, analyzes the idea of presence, the idea of presence, where something is imbued with a certain presence. Something is imbued with a certain presence. But Derridian philosophy also talks about, say, the absence, the idea of absence, the idea of gaps, the idea of non-presence. And in the Western philosophy, say, presence is a very important concept. So that whole idea of phonocentrism is based on this notion of presence, where when a speaker speaks, he feels that probably he is in full control of his meanings, and writing takes away that presence. Speaking, act of speaking has that element of presence. So when we see the ghost comes from the past, the ghost is also, say, very much there in the present, and here the idea of difference becomes important because the actual and the real contrasted with what is absent, what is non-present. One thing. At another level, when we think about the concept of ontology, there it presents in very simple terms that past always haunts. That specter of Marx always haunts. And here a different kind of vocabulary is introduced in literary criticism. And what is that vocabulary? One important aspect of good vocabulary is spectrality effect. So if we are reading a work, we are looking for spectrality effect. That means something which is absent, and that absent thing haunting the present. Something which is absent that is haunting the present. And so when we see writing, when we see about when we see uses of language, we are looking at those absences, we are looking at those gaps, we are looking at those ghosts, we are looking, say, at those spirits, apparitions, which are not here in the text but which nevertheless haunt this text. That is the linguistic aspect that we have covered. Now on to another level. Ontology, or the logic of ontology, was made very popular, especially by some critics of music, especially by some cultural critics in later periods. One important name in this respect was that of Paul Fisher. I'm sorry, Fisher, I'm getting right, but say Paul, I'm just say maybe just I'll have to check it. But I am familiar with his work as such. He tried to talk about music. Tried to talk about electronic music, and he also tried to talk about different aspects of music and also the idea of lost futures through the concept of ontology. Now, what is this idea of lost futures? And what is this idea of ontology as applied to music and as applied to arts, as applied to films? There, what one can see is that so many changes have taken place in the world. So many changes have taken place in the world in the last 50 years, and these changes, so the pace of these changes has been simply stupendous. And Fisher gives an interesting example that if a certain musical note or if a certain innovation in music which is introduced in 1993, suppose if it were to be presented to somebody in 1989, then the person in 1989 would have received that note or that element of music with a sense of disbelief. That means in just 4 years' time, so much change was possible. We have seen it ourselves. We could not have imagined that we will be, say, talking to you like this. But since, say, the beginning of World Wide Web, since the beginning of Internet, say, all these changes have taken place and these changes have taken place fast. But Fisher's idea is that from the year 2000 or so, we reach a particular point where not many changes were taking place, or if not changes, rather there was a kind of leveling. And so this was also the time when in art, in music, in other cultural productions, say people started looking toward the past. And you also have that concept of retro films, for example, retro films. But here the reference is to many of those, say, events which will take place later, but which are predicted, hinted at in those earlier cultural forms, right? That is the concept of ontology is a very useful concept, especially for students of films, for students of music, and more than Jacques Derrida, it was Fisher who made this concept very popular. Right. Now, ontology is also a concept which talks about some of those political questions also. So if Derrida talks about Karl Marx and his ideas, and he admits that his work could not have been possible without Karl Marx, although he is not a Marxist, then Derrida is also answering in a way to this charge of silence on political questions. And here we must add another interesting line from him. He's saying that his work is written in a spirit of Marxism. In a spirit of Marxism, not in the spirit of Marxism. In a spirit of Marxism. So This charge of formalism, which deconstruction has been battling, has been fighting, is answered by Jacques Derrida in this manner. Now, this brings us to the last point in today's discussion. And by the way, we also have come full circle. How, that when we started, we talked about three important dimensions of deconstructive theory. One was the linguistic dimension or linguistic basis of deconstructive theory. The other was philosophical dimension of deconstructive theory, and the third was the political dimension of deconstructive theory. And you see, when we reach this particular point, we have discussed at length, say, that linguistic dimension of deconstructive theory. We have also discussed philosophical dimension of deconstructive theory. Here we talked about, say, concept of logocentrism and phonocentrism, and political dimension, where we talk about the concept of center, and how Western philosophy is based on that concept of center, and how Jacques Derrida's work is a kind of attack on that idea of center. In the union of Marxism and deconstruction, we see that this political question is addressed. Marxism is all about politics. It's a political theory. So when we see some common point between Marxism and deconstruction, we are in a way addressing those political questions head on. Deconstruction appears to be against the spirit of authoritarianism in the sense that it refuses to accept one single authoritarian meaning. So here you see that kind of political dimension of deconstruction. Deconstruction is all about pluralism, another important aspect of politics. And furthermore, if we recall that this movement or because Derrida's
निकले यहाँ से
work,
बताओ
the initial work,
ले आइए इधर
of, for that matter, the work of Rene Barthes appeared in the context of students' protest movement in France, which tried to overthrow the political power of the times. So there you also see that kind of subtle link between post-structuralist theory and the political question. So this question is also answered like this. Now, when we say that we have come full circle, the concept of ontology, for example, it is an important concept where you can see that political question also, and you can also see, say, use of this particular concept in some other fields. Towards the end, one important subject that remains to be discussed, which I will discuss, is deconstructive criticism, especially as it has been practiced in the United States of America. And that is why we also talk about American deconstruction, because no other theory since new criticism appealed so much to American critics as deconstruction. Whether American Academy has taken up the political dimension of deconstructive theory or not, this is debatable. But what is important is that American Academy has taken up that linguistic aspect of deconstructive theory. And it is said that many of those critics who use deconstructive theory, especially the linguistic aspect of deconstructive theory, they probably overdid the job of interpretation. And somebody who could not have agreed with them was George Derrida himself. But we must think about that letter also, which was written by Cambridge Dawn, where they talked about the influence of Jacques Derrida on literary criticism, where they acknowledged very grudgingly the influence of Jacques Derrida on literary criticism. And so this is an important deconstructive, American deconstruction, where we talk about somebody like Paul Deman, we talk about Phyllis Miller, we talk about, say, aspects of Harold Bloom's theory, although he is not a deconstructionist critic per se. So we conclude our discussion at this point. Very quick point from somebody, and here I must welcome some of my old friends who have joined this discussion. There is Rafaqat, an old student of Aligarh Muslim University. He is teaching in say GF College Shahjahanpur. Aisha Zebi, she also did PhD from here. Aisha, welcome. Rafaqat, welcome. And
Thank you.
I would like Madiha to welcome them formally, quickly. Madiha.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome you all to this. I think this will be somewhere around the 60 something session that sir has been taking of literary theory, and for us coming from the first year of MA, it has been very insightful, and I kind of understand why you've come